Have you ever felt crushed inside and no one noticed? Have you ever woken up with a heavy heart without knowing exactly why, as if an invisible shadow accompanied you, even in moments of silence? Waking up, breathing, continuing. Everything seems automatic, as if life has lost its color and no one around you understands this pain that you can't explain. It's an anguish that doesn't scream, but slowly consumes you. You smile, talk, work, live, but inside you there is a trapped, muffled, ignored scream. And maybe, just maybe, today is the day that cry finds an answer. Most people never realize this, but today you will. There is a spiritual truth so powerful, so ignored, that it has been the reason many live in silent war with their own souls. This truth has been hidden by voices that minimize the pain, by ready-made phrases that do not heal, by fake smiles that disguise the internal collapse. But Jesus speaks to you now, and what he wants to reveal could be the beginning of the end of this silent anguish that you have carried for so long. Maybe you've already asked yourself, why do I feel this way even though I pray, even though I believe in God? Perhaps you have already believed that feeling anguish is a sign of a lack of faith. But what if I told you that anguish is not the end of faith, but rather the exact place where faith begins to be restored? There is something that almost no one has told you. Jesus knows the sound of your silence, and he is already moving toward you. You are here now because you were brought, not by chance, but by a calling. This is not just another video, it's a moment. A sacred moment. Take a deep breath. Open your heart, because God is about to speak to you, and this message will change the way you see everything. If this introduction is already speaking to your soul, write in the comments, Jesus, I need to hear you. Your comment could be just the seed of hope someone needs to find, and if this message is touching you right now, click the like button. Because this way, more people can be reached by this freeing truth. Jesus speaks to you, and what he will reveal now could be the beginning of the healing your heart has always sought. You are not here by chance. There is something inside you that brought you to this message. Maybe it was the constant restlessness in your chest, maybe that silent prayer said in the dark of your room, or that nagging feeling that no one really understands the depth of what you feel. But God understands. Jesus speaks to you. He knows your wounded soul, the thoughts you never dared to share, and the feelings you try to silence, but that still scream inside you. What is about to be revealed here is more than a word. It is a breath of life into your pain. It's the healing touch on the silent anguish that has accompanied you for so long. Take a deep breath and open your heart to this message. This is a sacred moment. A space where Christian spirituality meets the emotional reality you live every day. A meeting point between your pain and the promise of relief that Jesus offers. Get ready, because God can speak directly to you today. And when he speaks, something within us begins to be restored. What you will hear in this video will touch upon layers that you may not have even known existed. It will illuminate dark corners of the soul, where for a long time only fear, insecurity, tiredness, and confusion lived. But now it's different. Now is the time to respond. If this message is touching your heart, tell us in the comments, I trust in Jesus. Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. It could be the seed that will blossom in the life of another wounded heart. And if you felt something different at this moment, click the like button. Not because of me, but because this can make more people who today are at their emotional limit receive this word of healing and liberation. Your gesture can be an act of evangelization and perhaps someone's silent help. Jesus warned something very important about this situation, and you need to hear it before leaving this video. What comes next may change the way you see the pain that accompanies you. Because the truth is that there is a type of anguish that not even those around us understand, and it is precisely there, where no one sees, that Jesus begins to act. She cried when no one saw her. Anna silently folded before an altar while the world around her followed her rhythm without noticing the storm that was forming inside her. His eyes had already become accustomed to the burning of tears, and his heart to the loneliness of carrying a pain that seemed to have no end. It was the pain of wanting something so deeply that the simple fact of not having it made everything seem unfair. It wasn't just about not having children. It was about feeling forgotten by God. It was about waking up every day with an emptiness in your chest, with your soul begging for a touch from heaven. And, faced with that, she did what many people today no longer do. She poured herself out. Not in a polite, religious, or rehearsed way. She truly poured herself out. So she, with bitterness of soul, prayed to the Lord and wept abundantly. 1 Sam 1:10. This was not weakness. This was faith in its rawest form. Maybe you've never knelt like Anna. Or maybe you have, but without finding the words. Maybe what you feel now is exactly that silent bitterness, that pain that steals the shine from your eyes as soon as you wake up. There are days when getting out of bed feels like a war, where you take a deep breath, look up at the ceiling, and ask yourself, why am I still feeling this emptiness? The name for this is silent anguish. And it cannot be cured with distraction, with ready-made phrases, or with false smiles. She heals with presence, and Jesus speaks to you, even when no one else listens. He understands what your tears mean, when even you can't explain it. He does not reject the prayer of the afflicted. Instead, he draws near to the broken. But there is something no one told you about this pain. It is not a punishment. She is a cry waiting for an answer, and the answer is Jesus. He's the only one who doesn't ask you to be strong all the time. He's the only one who doesn't care about the mess in your soul. He doesn't come into your life asking for order. He comes in offering relief. But relief only begins when you do what Anna did, when you stop being silent out of politeness and start spilling out of necessity, when you turn your pain into prayer that is raw, honest, even clumsy, but real. There is no stronger link with God than that of truth. Religion can try to teach you how to pray beautifully. Jesus just wants you to really pray. And perhaps this is the biggest challenge, admitting that you are not well, that there's something inside you that's hurting, drying out, screaming, even when no one sees it. The heaviness you feel in your chest when you wake up is not a sign of weakness. It's a reminder that you need to go back to the source. And the source is not a formula nor well-intentioned advice. The source is a person, Jesus, the same one who listened to Anna, the same one who is listening to you now. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe this void is, in fact, a space that can only be filled by a presence? That this anguish may not be an error on your part, but an alert from your soul crying out to God? Because no matter how much you try to fill this hole with distractions, achievements, or even prayers empty of connection, nothing will satisfy what only the presence of Jesus can calm. Anna understood this. And when she gave herself completely, without masks, without filters, something changed. It wasn't the miracle that arrived first. It was peace. The peace of someone who knows they have been heard. And that's what you need most right now, knowing that you were heard. If this word spoke to your heart, write in the comments, Jesus, I need to be heard. Sometimes the simple act of writing is your prayer materializing. Sometimes that comment will be the push another hurting heart needed to have hope again. Don't underestimate the impact of your faith. Even when it seems small, it moves the sky. And if this message has already touched something deep within you, click the like button. Because your gesture can be the link that God will use to reach other lives crushed by the same pain. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Because there are pains that make us scream inside, even when our face smiles. And it is exactly in this contrast that Jesus acts most. David was hiding, not in any cave, but inside a pain that crushed him. He was anointed, yes, chosen by God, yes, but still he was running away. The man who had faced Goliath now trembled before a king, not out of cowardice, but out of exhaustion. Inside, he screamed. On the outside, he needed to appear strong, and this is a pain that many carry, that of smiling on the outside, while inside, the heart bleeds in silence. David knew what it was like to live under persecution, not just physical, but emotional. The fear, the insecurity, the feeling that no one understands the weight you carry. All of this accumulated inside him like a storm ready to explode. The Lord is near to those who are broken-hearted. Psalm 34:18. It was this truth that kept him standing, not the absence of pain, but the presence of God inside the pain. How many times have you seen yourself like this? Trying to keep up appearances, trying not to worry anyone, trying to be strong, while inside everything seemed to be falling apart. You go to work, answer messages, post a photo, smiling, but when you lock yourself in your room, the silence is deafening. The pillow knows about the tears that no one sees, and the chest, this war companion, knows the weight of each breath contained so as not to explode. It's like living in two worlds at the same time, one where you pretend everything is fine, another where you beg for help, and the truth is, Jesus speaks to you in exactly that place. There is a divine presence that does not require a mask, who is not scared by your vulnerability, who doesn't turn away in the face of your emotional collapse. On the contrary, he approaches. And it's not just a figure of speech, he really gets closer. He sits on the floor of your cave. He goes behind the scenes of your soul. He touches where no one else dares to touch, because Jesus doesn't just see what you're facing, he feels it. He carries it with you, and more than that, it gives you a new breath. But here's a revelation that perhaps no one has told you. The suffering you hide could be the soil where God wants to plant something new. What looks like an end may, in fact, be a beginning. David wrote Psalms in the midst of chaos. He didn't wait until he was well to worship. He didn't need a stage applause or emotional stability. He just needed sincerity. The truth is that God does not require you to have strength. He just wants you to stop pretending you don't need him. Because it is in brokenness that he dwells. It's where everything inside you screams that he whispers, "I am here." Do you know what that means? That you can stop right now. Not to fall, but to be supported. You no longer have to pretend you can handle it. You no longer need to lie to yourself saying everything is fine. It's okay to not be okay when you run into the right arms. And those arms are not far away. They are open, ready, extended towards you. That's why this message reached you, because God wants you to know that you are not alone, that he sees what others don't see, that he understands what others cannot understand, and that he is ready to carry you when your legs can no longer support you. If this word is touching your heart, tell us in the comments, "Jesus is my strength." Your comment may be what someone in total despair needs to read to keep from giving up. It could be confirmation that no one is truly alone in the battle. And your pain, however hidden it may be, can become a testimony. It could be the beginning of a healing that goes far beyond you. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Because there are times when the biggest enemy is not external. It is our own mind, which cannot remain silent. And what happens next will change the way you understand inner peace. Martha didn't stop. His feet paced from side to side, his hands agitated, his mind raced. She didn't know how to rest. Even with Jesus inside her house, she still felt like she needed to prove something. Do more, control everything, be enough. While Mary was at the Master's feet, Martha was surrounded by tasks. And not because she was bad, but because I was tired, anxious, confused, prisoner of a mind that couldn't calm down. Martha, Martha, you are restless and worry about many things. Luke 10:41. Jesus' tone was not one of reproof. It was one of compassion. It was like someone looking you in the eye and saying, "You can stop now, I'm here." How many times have you seen yourself as Martha? living on constant alert, sleeping with your mind on fire, trying to solve everything alone. And even when you pray, you can't turn it off. Even when you believe, do you still feel that mental buzz that consumes you inside? This is the pain of the mind that won't shut up. The body even rests, but the heart continues at war. Modern anxiety is like background noise. It's there when you wake up. It accompanies you while you work, hides in distractions, but it never disappears. There are days when it seems impossible to find peace. And even when you try to pray, your mind becomes scattered. It's as if thoughts run over each other. You talk to God, but you don't even know if He's listening. And what's more, you're not listening. Because there is a storm inside, and the world, with its rush, its demands, its constant stimuli, doesn't give you space to simply be. But Jesus speaks to you now. Come, sit down. Breathe, rest. I don't need you to solve everything. I just want you around. It is an illusion to think that true faith is a life without agitated thoughts. Real faith is the one that runs to Jesus even when everything inside is noisy. Martha was trying to serve Jesus, but she had forgotten to be with Him. And that's the key. The healing of the restless mind is not in control, it's in presence. It's stopping everything for a moment and just sitting at His feet. Like Mary, because there, in the place of listening, peace begins to be born. And it's not just any peace. It is the one that surpasses understanding. That silences the internal chaos without needing to change external circumstances. Have you ever wondered why, even though you pray, you still feel so anxious? Maybe it's because you're talking to Jesus, but you're not stopping to listen. It is not resting in presence. You are trying to control what was supposed to be delivered. The mind calms down when the heart trusts, and confidence only comes when you stop running away from God's presence as if it were just another task on your list. God does not want to be an item in your day. He wants to be your refuge, the place where you can breathe without fear, think without guilt, rest without pressure. And the most surprising thing is that you don't need to have everything figured out to go to Him. He already knows you in the chaos. And yet, it invites you to sit down. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, "Jesus, calm my mind." Sometimes the simple act of declaring this is what opens the door to the peace you so desperately need. And your comment could be exactly the relief that another anxious soul will find when stopping by. If this message touched your heart, click the like button so that others can also be blessed. Your gesture can be an instrument of God to reach lives that right now are fighting an internal storm. But what if I told you that what you were taught about faith might be incomplete? Because there are times when trusting God seems impossible, and it is exactly there, where trust fails, that Jesus reveals something that changes everything. Peter walked on the water, something impossible, unthinkable, illogical. But at that moment, he experienced the extraordinary. His eyes were fixed on Jesus. Fear seemed distant, and for the first time he experienced what it was like to trust completely. However, all it took was a strong wind, a higher wave, an external noise, and doubt entered. The same man who dared to step into the sea began to sink. Trust crumbled in seconds, as it happens to all of us when the winds of life blow louder than we can bear. And then, in the midst of his panic, the hand of Jesus reaches him. No judgment, no scolding, just a question that crosses the centuries and reaches us. "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. It wasn't an accusation, it was an invitation. A call to look back at the one who never takes his eyes off us. This story resonates with everyone who has ever tried to trust, but sunk. Because it's not always easy to keep your faith standing when life makes you sink from the inside out. You believe, but you doubt. Well, but question, walks but stumbles, and he often blames himself for it. You think that God only approaches the strong, the unshakable, those who do not tremble in the face of pain. But what if I told you that does Jesus speak to you just when you are sinking? What if it's true that your weakness is not the end of your faith, but the beginning of the miracle? Peter sank not because he was weak, but because he was human. And Jesus knew this. He didn't wait for Pedro to swim back. He did not wait for Peter to prove that he deserved to be saved. He simply extended his hand. Because grace always anticipates guilt. Because the love of Christ does not depend on the firmness of our step, but on the constancy of his gaze. And his gaze never strays. Even when our faith fails, he remains faithful. Maybe you're going through a moment where trust seems impossible. Maybe everything you built is falling apart. Maybe you are feeling suffocated by thoughts that tell you that you have let God down, that he is silent, that you have failed. But the truth is that he is already coming to meet you. He is walking on top of the waters of his emotional confusion. He is crossing the sea of his uncertainties. Not to charge you with faith, but to offer you a hand. Help does not come after perfection. Help comes in the middle of the fall. If you need this answer, declare in the comments, "Jesus, hold my hand." It may seem simple, but this phrase can be the bridge between your pain and the comfort you are waiting for. And by writing this, you are saying to heaven, "I still believe even though I am afraid." And this broken courage is too precious to God. And here comes a revelation that can change the way you see everything. Fear does not cancel faith. Fear is the scenario where faith proves real. You don't need to be unshakable. You just have to keep looking. Because the moment you look away, Jesus will still be looking at you. If this message touched your heart, click the like button so that others can also be blessed. This gesture can be the anchor that God will use to reach those who are about to sink into silence. But that's not all. What happens next will touch a pain that many hide even from those closest to them, because there are feelings that have no words, only tears, and Jesus knows exactly the place where no one can reach you. In the Garden of Gethsemane, the night was thick, the silence heavy. Jesus' breathing labored. There were no crowds, no miracles, no applause. Only he, kneeling with his face to the ground. "My soul is deeply saddened to the point of death," he said, Matthew 26:38. And there, in a moment of pain so intense that the Son of God himself sweats drops of blood, something is revealed. Jesus knows the pain that has no name. He understands the weight of feeling surrounded by people and yet completely alone. He experienced the anguish that visits you when no one notices. He felt the loneliness of not being understood, not even by those closest to him. Peter, James, and John were there, but they were asleep, unable to understand what Jesus was facing. And how many times have you been like this too, surrounded by voices, but invisible in the heart? There is a pain that the world does not see, the pain of smiling but being torn apart inside. To be strong for everyone, but fragile before God. From listening to advice that sounds empty and answers that only make it worse. You try to explain, but no one understands, because this pain doesn't scream. It whispers, and the whisper of the soul is ignored by distracted ears. But Jesus speaks to you now, and he not only understands, he feels. He has been exactly where you are. In the place where emotional abandonment seems to be the only company, where not even praying relieves, where the cry itself seems to echo in the void. But know this, Gethsemane was a place of solitude, yes, but it was also the place where heaven opened over suffering. Jesus was not spared from anguish, so that today he could be your relief. He drank the bitter cup of incomprehension, so that today you would know you are not alone. Even if no one understands, even if you can't put it into words, even if your eyes are dry, but your soul is wet inside. He sees, he listens, he feels, and he embraces you with a love that doesn't need to be explained. A love that goes between the lines of your pain and says, "I'm here, I understand." This is one of the most liberating truths of Christian spirituality. We do not need to be understood by men to be welcomed by Jesus. Our faith does not depend on the empathy of others, but on the certainty that we have a Savior who passed through Gethsemane and emerged victorious. Christ's victory did not begin on the cross. It began when he chose not to run away from pain, when he faced deep sadness with the certainty that it would be worth it. And he did it for you, for me, for all of us who, at some point, feel the weight of not being seen by anyone. If this message spoke to your heart, comment now, Jesus, you understand me. Because perhaps this is the biggest cry your soul needed to make today. And by declaring this, you're allowing yourself to be embraced by a presence that demands no explanation, only delivery. And now comes something that perhaps you have never heard. Your silence is not a sign of weakness. It is a sacred space where Jesus whispers truths that only the heart can hear. Gethsemane was not the end. It was the beginning of redemption. And your pain can also be the beginning of something powerful, but that's not all. There is a scene in the scriptures where faith fails in a way so human, so similar to us, that it is impossible not to see ourselves in it. Because there are times when not even miracles seem to be enough to keep faith alive. And that is where Jesus acts most tenderly. In that locked room, where the disciples were still hiding from fear, there was a man torn between what he saw and what he couldn't believe. Thomas, a disciple, a friend of Jesus, someone who walked alongside the Master, who saw miracles, who heard the promises, but who at that moment couldn't believe the most anticipated news in history, the resurrection. He was not present when Jesus first appeared to the disciples. And when they told him, "We have seen the Lord," Thomas responded with something that echoes in many hearts to this day. "If I don't see, if I don't touch, I won't believe." John 20:25. How many times has your faith also spoken like this? How many times was despair so strong that you thought, "I need proof, I need to feel, I need to see, because just hearing isn't enough anymore"? This is the moment where many give up. Not because they stopped loving God, but because pain made faith fragile. The soul is so wounded that promises seem too far away, prayers seem dry. God's silence seems cruel, and the mind, tired, begins to scream for visible answers. Thomas is not a villain of faith. He is the reflection of someone who once believed so much and saw everything fall apart. He does not doubt because he wants to offend the truth. He doubts because the trauma of the loss was too great. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him. Jesus does not cast him out. Jesus appears again 8 days later, only to restore a heart in crisis. And it says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Don't be an unbeliever, but a believer." John 20:27. Jesus shows the marks, and that's beautiful. Because he doesn't say, "How dare you doubt?" He says, "Touch, see. I'm here." Jesus speaks to you like this too. He is not offended by your pain. He does not turn away because his faith has weakened. He gets even closer. He invites you to touch the marks. He invites you to believe again. He understands the heart that prays crying and even so does not feel an answer. He understands the discouragement that comes after many battles and few victories. He understands the trauma that makes you hesitant to trust again. And maybe you grew up being told that having doubts was a sin. But what we see here is that sincere doubt does not repel Jesus. It attracts, because he prefers a wounded but honest heart to a decorated faith that never faces the truth. And if you are at that stage in your life, where you feel like you believe, but at the same time you can't see a way out, where you pray but feel empty, know this: Jesus still appears in the closed room. He still crosses the barriers of reason, fear, tiredness, and disbelief to say, "I'm here. You can touch. I'm still your Savior." If you identified with Thomas today, write in the comments, "Jesus, show me your marks." It is not a request for weak faith. It is a cry from those who want to be restored. And your comment could be the breath someone needs to continue believing. There is something surprising hidden in this story. Because after Thomas touched the marks, he didn't just believe in the resurrection. He declared, "My Lord and my God." It was the most profound confession of faith in the entire gospel. And it was born out of doubt. Yes, the most intense faith can be born from the deepest pain. And that's why Jesus speaks to you even when your faith fails, because he knows behind your doubt there is still a heart that wants to believe. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Jesus ends that encounter with a promise that spans the centuries and reaches you now. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. John 20:29. In other words, you who continue searching even without understanding everything, even without seeing anything, is called blessed. You are part of that promise. Your tired faith still has value. And Jesus is present, even when the eyes don't see it. In a boat rocking violently in the middle of the sea, the screams of the disciples are confused with the roar of the winds and the crash of the waves. The dark night seemed to have no end, and fear, which began as a whisper, now took over every look, every breath. They were exhausted, tired of rowing, of fighting, of trying to maintain control, and in the midst of the chaos, Jesus slept. Yes, he slept. How can anyone rest in the midst of a storm that threatens to turn everything upside down? How can you trust when all you see are signs of destruction around you? The text in Mark 4:38 reveals this moment of maximum tension. Master, do you not care if we perish? Perhaps you have already asked this same question in silence during the early hours of the morning. Jesus, don't you care? When sleep doesn't come, when the mind spins in cycles of worry, when the heart races for no reason, when the soul asks for help, but the sky seems silent. Insomnia is often the cruelest symptom of silent anguish. It's not just the eyes that refuse to close, it's the spirit that finds no rest. And in those moments, everything inside you cries out for relief, for peace, for a voice that says, everything is going to be okay. But the answer never seems to come. And then the pain turns into doubt, fear in disbelief, and the silence of God in a feeling of abandonment. But on that boat, something happens. Jesus gets up, he gets up, and with an authority that traverses the natural, he says to the wind and the sea, shut up, be still. Mark 4:39. And immediately there was a great bonanza, a new silence, a silence that does not hurt but heals. That doesn't suffocate but embraces, the kind of silence that only comes after Jesus' order. The soul, like the sea, needs to hear this order to return to peace. And the most impactful thing is to realize that Jesus did not stand up because the disciples had faith, but because they were afraid. It was their desperation that moved his heart. It was the cry of someone who no longer knew what to do that made Jesus act. Jesus speaks to you today in the same way. Your internal storm doesn't scare him. He is not offended by your insomnia. He is not far away as you try to find peace alone. The truth is that he is on the boat the whole time. Even when he seems inactive, he is present. Even when you think you're screaming alone in the dark, he's listening, and at the right time, at the exact moment your soul is about to break, he rises. And when he speaks, everything changes. If this message echoes something you have experienced or are experiencing, write in the comments, Jesus, calm my storm. Because sometimes, just by declaring this, the soul begins to hear the voice it has been waiting for. Your comment could be a request or a whisper of faith, but no, Jesus hears even what you can't put into words. There is a powerful revelation in this story. Jesus does not first question the disciples' fear. He first brings peace. Only then does he ask, why are you so timid? Don't you still have faith? Mark 4:40. He does not require maturity before calming the heart. He does not require emotional stability to act. He responds first with mercy, because his heart understands our limits. Jesus is not waiting for you to become strong enough to finally act. He acts because you are weak. He gets up because you are sinking. And that's what love does. You may have experienced many sleepless nights, with your mind racing and your thoughts at war. But what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. It's not the absence of trouble that brings rest. It's the presence of Jesus in the midst of the storm. The calm is not when the winds cease. That's when the heart begins to believe again that he is in control. Jeremiah was not a hero. He was young, inexperienced, and full of insecurities. The type of person who, in the eyes of the world, would be unlikely to be chosen for something big, but God called him. And when this call came, it was not with promises of comfort or an easy path. It was with a mission that would scare even the most experienced, to be a prophet to the nations. Imagine this being handed into the hands of someone who was still trying to understand their identity. Jeremiah responded, as many of us would when faced with a responsibility that seems greater than our ability. "Ah, Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child." Jeremiah 1:6. Fear of the future screamed louder than faith. The anxiety of not knowing how, where, or why paralyzed his courage. And therein lies a silent pain that many carry, the fear of what is to come, the anguish of what if it doesn't work, of what if I fail, of what if I'm not enough. The future challenges us because it is, by definition, unknown. And everything that is unknown triggers a defense instinct in us. We want control, but God does not call the ready. He prepares the calls. When Jeremiah presented his limitation, God responded with an order that left no room for debate. "Do not say, 'I am a child,' for to everyone to whom I send you, you will go, and whatever I command you, you will say." Jeremiah 1:7. This response is an antidote to the paralysis that anxiety causes. Jesus speaks to you now through this same principle. You don't need to understand the whole plan to take the next step. You just need to trust whoever is designing this plan. What scares you about tomorrow may be exactly the field where God wants to reveal something that only He can do. What if your insecurity is the place where He will show His power? Often, anxiety about the future is disguised as planning, but it's not planning, it's fear. Fear of not being in control, fear of not having guarantees, fear of repeating mistakes. And then the soul begins to live trapped in cycles of worry, even though nothing has happened yet. Have you ever noticed how your mind can create realities that don't even exist, and yet the body feels as if they are real? The heart races, the thoughts don't stop. You try to prepare for everything, but deep down, you just want to make sure you don't get hurt again. But God looks at you today and says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you came out of the womb, I sanctified you. I gave you a prophet to the nations." Jeremiah 1:5. In other words, I know you more than you know yourself, and I have seen the future that awaits you, and in it you are not alone. What paralyzes you is not what lies ahead. It's the lie that you will be alone to face what lies ahead, and that Jesus is here to undo. If this word found an echo in your heart, write in the comments, "Lord, I trust in your plans." Take that step of faith. Declare in public what fear tries to silence in silence. Your comment could become a seed of courage for someone who is also struggling with the unknown. The scene with Jeremiah ends with a promise that serves as a shelter for all restless souls. "Fear not before them, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord." Jeremiah 1:8. And that is the same promise that rests upon your story today. You may not know what tomorrow will be like, but you know who is in control of it, and that's enough. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Elijah was a man of God, a prophet who faced kings, challenged false gods, and saw fire fall from the sky in answer to his prayer. He had seen miracles, witnessed the supernatural, and been used powerfully by God, but even those who seem strongest can have moments of collapse. After a great deed against the prophets of Baal, Elijah fled. The threat of Jezebel, a queen determined to kill him, was the trigger for something that was already accumulated in his soul. He ran into the desert, and there, exhausted, broken within, he cried out, "Enough is enough, O Lord, take my life." 1 Kings 19:4. Maybe you've never spoken these words, but you've felt like this, like everything has reached its limit. As if your insides were silently screaming for an end. The pain of feeling like you won't be able to bear it isn't always visible. Often it masks itself behind an "I'm fine," an automatic smile, a routine carried out on autopilot. But inside something says, no more. This pain is silent, because whoever feels it fears being misunderstood, fear of being judged for weakness, fear of appearing ungrateful. After all, there are people going through worse things, right? But God does not measure pain by comparison. He measures by the truth of the heart. And Elijah, there in that desert, teaches us that even the most spiritual people face days when they just want to disappear. Elijah's escape was not from a battle. It was from the emotional overload of a lifetime. But Jesus speaks to you exactly in that place where your strength ends, because it was there, at the edge of despair, that God sent an angel, not to preach a sermon, not to scold, but to touch, feed, and make Elijah rest. And that changes everything. Because sometimes what the soul needs most is not answers, but relief. It's not about logic, it's about presence. God is not absent in deserts. He appears intimately and personally, with care, with provision, with grace. He doesn't give up on you when you're down. On the contrary, it is on this ground that he approaches. And when Elijah sleeps again, the angel returns, as if to say, I know that once is not enough. I know that your fight is not simple. So I am here again. What a powerful image this is. A God who not only visits but insists, which does not require performance but offers care, which does not require strength but offers sustenance. Maybe you're like Elijah, lying under an invisible burden, too tired to go on, with your mind telling you, there's no reason to go on. But there is, and that reason doesn't depend on you. It depends on him, because the angel doesn't just feed Elijah. He says, get up and eat, for it will be a long way for you. 1 Kings 19:7. In other words, you still have a journey. There is still something in store. There is still purpose, even when you don't feel it. And that's when everything changes. If this message spoke deeply to your heart, write in the comments, Lord, give me strength to continue. You can't imagine how your comment could be the answer to someone who is also silent, struggling with deep discouragement. Your act of faith can spark hope in another heart. Jesus speaks to you now to remember, you are not alone. The same God who sustained Elijah in the desert is the same one who is with you today. He didn't abandon you. He sees you. He knows every internal battle you fight, and more than that, he's already preparing what you need to lift. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Peter was no stranger to the love of Jesus. He was one of the closest, one of the first to be called, one of the few who saw miracles that no one else had seen. He was the same one who walked on the water by faith, who saw the glory of Christ on the mountain of transfiguration, who promised faithfulness until death. But he was also the one who, when the pressure tightened and fear won, denied knowing the one who loved him most. 3 times, in a matter of minutes. And what tears the soul apart so violently was not just the act of denial. It was the moment when, after the rooster crowed, Jesus looked at him, a look that did not condemn, but saw everything. And at that moment, Pedro's inner world collapses. Luke records, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. Luke 22:62. The pain of carrying guilt that we cannot forget is one of the heaviest that anyone can bear. It's the pain of, if I had done it differently, of, why did I let this happen, of, I knew, and I still did it. Peter knew the truth. He knew who Jesus was. He had been warned of what would happen, and yet it failed. When we recognize ourselves in this story, we realize that the guilt that haunts us is not just for the mistake we made, but for the conscience we had and ignored. This is the guilt that cuts deepest, because we know we could have chosen another path, and the heart that carries this weight isolates itself. Stay away from promises, avoid prayers. He runs away from intimacy with God, as if heaven itself had become a mirror of accusation. But Jesus speaks to you precisely in that abyss where shame took root. Because he didn't end Peter's story with a denial, Jesus' look was not the end point. It was the culmination of the restoration. The cross had not yet happened, but forgiveness was already on the way. Peter's redemption began with tears and ended with grace. And this is the central point. Jesus does not wait for us to be perfect to restore us. He reaches us broken. After the resurrection, when he meets Peter again at the seashore, Jesus does not mention denial. He does not rub the guilt in the disciples' face. He just asks, "Do you love me?" 3 times. One for each fall, one for each failure, one for every lie told in fear. And with each yes from Peter, Jesus rescues not only his faith, but his identity. What was shame becomes a mission. What was a fall becomes called. Do you feel like you made too many mistakes? What crossed the limit? Who betrayed divine trust? Jesus looks at you today the same way he looked at Peter, with love and restoration in his eyes. He didn't come to remind you of what you did. He came to remind you of who you are, someone worth dying for, someone who can be used even after the fall, someone who can love and be loved again. That guilt you carry no longer has authority over you when you allow yourself to be touched by that look of grace. If this message spoke to your heart, comment now, "Jesus, restore what guilt destroyed." Your comment can not only be the first step towards your own liberation, but it can also be the push someone needs to believe that there is still hope. You can be an instrument of healing while also being healed, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. It was an ordinary day, like all the others. The sun slowly rose above the horizon as the noises of the city mixed with the sound of the water. At the edge of the pool of Bethesda, a man remained motionless, almost invisible among so many other patients. 38 years. That was the time he carried his pain, his waiting, his helplessness. The time your soul was silent, as if hope had become just a distant echo within you. Nobody helped him. Nobody cared. He saw the water stir. He saw others being healed. But there was always someone who arrived first. There was always a bigger obstacle. Always an excuse stronger than the will. Until that day Jesus approached. It was not he who ran to Christ. It was Christ who walked to him. Jesus saw him. Among the crowd, among the forgotten, among the tired, and he asked a question that seemed absurd, almost cruel. Do you want to be cured? John 5-6. Jesus' question reveals a hidden truth. Not everyone who suffers wants to get up. Not everyone who carries pain wants to let it go. Sometimes suffering becomes identity. Sometimes discouragement becomes shelter. When the paralytic responds, he does not say yes. He explains why he can't. He justifies himself. He repeats the pattern of those who are already emotionally exhausted, finding reasons to stay where they are. Because when the soul is tired, even the idea of getting better seems exhausting. When the soul has been hurt for a long time, it begins to doubt that anything can change. But Jesus speaks to you precisely at this point, when the weight of waiting turns into conformity, when old pain becomes confused with who you are. He asks why he doesn't force change. He invites, it activates. He calls you to return to desire what you stopped dreaming of. Jesus knew that this man wanted healing. But before healing the body, he needed to confront the mind. And this is the root of our silent anguish. Many times, the miracle is before us, but the tired mind has already given up believing. If you feel like this, without strength, without courage, just waiting for time to pass, Jesus asks you the same question today, but it's not a billing question. It is an invitation of love. Do you want to be healed? It doesn't matter how long you've been in this situation. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried and failed. What matters is that today he saw you, in the middle of your routine, in the middle of your room, in the middle of your fight. He didn't pass you. He stopped, he turned, and he calls you by name. Get up. Even if it still hurts, even though it's still difficult, even if your body is weak, your faith is withered, and your soul seems numb. The voice that is calling you has the power to lift you to your feet. Jesus' order does not depend on your strength. It releases power to break cycles, untie prisons, and lift dormant destinies. It was like that with the paralytic, and it may be like that with you. If this message touched you, write in the comments, "Jesus, I want to be healed." Your answer is more than a sentence. It's a sign to heaven that your heart still lives. And maybe someone reading what you wrote will find the strength to say the same, because there are healings that begin when a tired soul decides to believe again. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. She was almost part of the landscape, almost invisible. The woman who had been hunched over for 18 years walked through the streets as if she were carrying the world on her back. Her body bent, her gaze fixed on the ground, her soul oppressed by something that no one saw, no one named, no one helped. He didn't scream, he didn't cry loudly, he didn't ask for attention. But every day, her silent pain accompanied her, bending not only her spine, but also her dignity. For 18 years, he lived with looks of pity, with hidden judgments, with the feeling of being less than, a pain that does not bleed, but consumes, an anguish that cannot be explained, but accumulates. She entered the synagogue like everyone else, but left as if nothing had changed. Until on a Saturday, Jesus was there. The narrative of Luke 13:10-13 transports us to one of the most powerful and underrated scenes in Christ's ministry. Jesus sees what no one was willing to notice. He interrupts the religious moment. He stops everything to turn to that woman that no one else looked at. And before everyone, he says, "Woman, you are free from your illness." Luke 13:12. There was no prolonged prayer, no demand for public faith. There was a ringing, a gesture, an act that restored not only the spine, but the woman's identity. She straightens up for the first time in nearly 2 decades, but the real miracle was not just physical. It was the release of what oppressed her inside. How many people today are hunched over inside? Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. How many walk through the world with their souls bent, carrying invisible burdens? Unresolved traumas, words that hurt, losses that were never truly mourned. We are the bent woman when we spend years pretending that everything is fine, while inside everything is pushing us down. When we carry blame, that is not ours. When we endure pressures that slowly bend us until we can no longer look up. But Jesus speaks to you now. You were not born to live like this. The freedom that Jesus brings is not just for the eyes of others. It is for the inside. He sees what no one sees. He touches where no one dares to touch. The weight that no one notices, he feels. And more than relieving the pain, he comes to straighten you out, to restore your posture, so that you can look at yourself in the mirror with dignity again, so that your shoulders carry grace, not condemnation, so that your soul can breathe again. Because the touch of Jesus is not a momentary relief, it is a realignment of your identity. If this word spoke to your heart, comment, "Jesus, take away the weight that no one sees." Maybe your pain has been hidden for too long. Maybe you're tired of pretending. But today could be your moment to be seen, to be touched, to be lifted up. The same voice that freed that woman is the one that now echoes inside her. You can be healed. You can be free. You can walk upright again. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. He was covered in ash, shrouded in silence and pain. Job, once a man of integrity, respect, and prosperity, now found himself surrounded by desolation, the dead children, the goods consumed, the sick body. Friends, the few that remained, brought no comfort, only judgment. The wife, overcome by bitterness, said, "Curse your God and die." Job 2:9. But he remained there amidst the ruins, trying to understand why there was so much suffering. What had he done to deserve that? Had God abandoned him? Could it be that the sky was silent? Maybe you've already asked the same questions when everything seems to fall apart around you. When the thing you loved most is taken away unexpectedly. When what you built with years of effort turns to dust in the blink of an eye. When the emotional pain is so intense that the shine of life is completely extinguished, it's not just sadness. It's a type of anguish that takes over everything. It's the weight of waking up and not wanting to fight anymore. It's the feeling that you won't make it through, the pain that eats away inside, the absence of meaning, the void. And like Job, you may look to the sky for answers and find only silence. But there is a secret hidden in this story. And few know this truth. Job was not punished. He was tested, not by God's malice, but by something that Job himself would never understand at that moment. His suffering was not a sign of rejection, but of purpose. What human eyes saw as defeat on the divine plane was a process, not to destroy it, but to reveal it. In chapter 42, after all, Job declares, "I know that you can do all things, and none of your plans can be thwarted." Job 42:2. This is a confession from someone who went through the valley of emotional and spiritual death and survived. More than that, it has been restored in everything, but not in the same way. Job was not just restored materially. He was transformed from within. Pain didn't define him, it refined him. This is exactly where the story finds its life. Maybe you are in chapter 3 of your pain, at the height of your anguish, and you think there is nothing more after that. But Jesus speaks to you. Chapter 42 is yet to come, and it will bring answers that you cannot see today. God is not indifferent to your pain. The silence you feel is not absence, it is invisible work. He is building something that goes beyond what you can imagine. Your suffering is not punishment, it is stoning. It is the field where he plants a purpose that will still flourish. Because, just like Job, you will look back one day and realize that what seemed like the end was just the beginning of a new story. If this message spoke to your heart, write in the comments, "Jesus, restore what pain tried to erase." You don't need to have all the answers today. You just need to remember that the God who allowed your pain is the same one who promised to be with you every day. Even on days when everything seems lost, he does not waste suffering. Your every tear is counted, every silent night recorded, and he will use all of this for the greater good. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because there is something in you that he is preparing for something eternal. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. He shouted, but there was no response. He cried out, but the sky seemed closed. Habakkuk, the prophet of chaos, found himself surrounded by injustice, violence, and corruption. He watched his people crumble morally, the wicked prosper, and God silent. Where was the Lord when the innocent were oppressed? Where was God when everything seemed out of control? How long, Lord, will I cry, and you will not listen to me? HC 1:2. Habakkuk's outburst is not just a prayer, it is a cry of the soul, a cry that also echoes in many hearts today. Perhaps you have already experienced something similar, that phase where you pray, and nothing happens. Where you ask for signs and they don't come, when everything goes wrong, and yet you keep trying to keep the faith because giving up seems even more painful. But what really hurts is not the absence of a solution, it's silence. God's silence weighs like a rock on the heart, and this is where many people break down. Because silence can feel like abandonment, but what if I told you that God's silence is also language? Habakkuk did not receive immediate answers. God did not explain in detail the reason for each injustice. He didn't give a step-by-step plan of what he would do. But something profound happened. Habakkuk learned to listen to what can only be heard in silence. He learned that faith is not trust in explanations, but trust in who is in control, even when everything seems out of control. In chapter 3, something impressive happens. The same man who previously complained with anguish now stands up with praise. Nevertheless, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. HC 3:18. The scenario has not changed, but his heart does. He went from revolt to surrender, from despair to rest, from the noise of doubt to the peace that comes from trust. Jesus speaks to you. even when you feel that he is silent. Perhaps what you need most right now is not a new answer, but a new perspective, because God's silence is not contempt. It's preparation. It is the interval between the seed and the fruit. It is in silence that the root deepens, that the structure is strengthened, that faith is purified. What he promised, he will fulfill. But not your way, not even in your time, because his timing is perfect. And even though you are now surrounded by unanswered questions, he is there. In every detail, don't breathe. At dawn, in the invisible care that sustains you. If this word touched your heart, comment, "Even in silence I trust in you," because your act of writing is already a step of faith. And faith, my friend, is what moves mountains. Habakkuk did not have all the reasons revealed, but he discovered the most important one, that the who is greater than the why. When you know who your God is, you can cross any valley, including the valley of silence, because he is there. And his silence is never empty. It's full of promise in the making. It's full of plans that haven't been revealed yet. It's full of love that works behind the scenes. But that's not all. There is something even more powerful waiting to be revealed. He climbed a tree because the ground no longer received him with dignity. Zacchaeus was the head of the tax collectors, a rich man, but rejected, despised, ignored by everyone around him. He bore the label of traitor for working for the Romans, and although he lived amid material opulence, his soul bled with loneliness and shame. He could buy banquets, but he did not belong at the tables. He could wear expensive clothes, but he didn't feel worthy of being looked in the eye. There was an invisible pain that became unbearable as time went by, the pain of not feeling worthy even of God's love. That morning in Jericho seemed ordinary until the buzz grew. Jesus is coming. Perhaps Zacchaeus had already heard of him, the man who ate with sinners, who touched lepers, who saw the invisible. Hope lit up. But how could a man so small in stature and so socially excluded approach him? The crowd didn't give him space. The people around him avoided him, murmured, judged. Still, something drove him. He runs, climbs a tree, because shame pushed him away, but yearning pushed him closer. And then the unlikely happens. Jesus, in the midst of a crowd that pressed him from all sides, stopped. He looks up and sees Zacchaeus, not with contempt, not with judgment, but with love, with purpose, with choice. "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because today I want to stay at your house." Luke 19:5. What Zacchaeus never dared to ask for, Jesus offered. What he thought was impossible, Jesus declared with authority. It wasn't just about entering the physical house. It was about getting into the soul of a man who felt unworthy of being noticed. Jesus speaks to you, and perhaps today he is stopping right where you hide. Maybe you've spent a lifetime being told you're not enough. That was so wrong. That doesn't fit. Maybe you believed that your story was too simple, too tarnished, too devalued for God to want to get closer. But what few understand is that Jesus does not see as the world sees. He looks beyond reputation. He sees beyond appearance. He cuts through the crowd for a single soul, yours. Zacchaeus' transformation was instantaneous. He didn't hear a sermon. He was not reprimanded. He was not charged. He was looked at. He was called. He was welcomed, and that was enough. The man who previously accumulated for himself now gave back to others. What previously hid now stood up with courage. Because love, when it is true, changes everything. Jesus didn't just clear Zacchaeus' name in the city. He restored his identity before heaven. Today, salvation has come to this house. Luke 19:9. If you have ever felt small, rejected, forgotten, write in the comments, "Jesus sees me," because only those who have been ignored know the value of being noticed. Only those who have felt invisible know the impact of being called by name. Jesus does not wait for you to become someone better before accepting you. He calls you as you are. He sees you in the tree where you hide, and when he says today, it's because he wants to do it now. He wants to land in your story, give you a new beginning, the value that no one else recognized. He had already seen it from the beginning. But this is still just the beginning. What comes next could be even more transformative than you imagine. The road to Damascus was bathed in sunlight, but Saul's heart was plunged into darkness. He walked quickly, determined, convinced he was doing the right thing. But inside, the soul screamed without a sound. Who was he anyway? A zealous religious person, a persecutor of Christians, a confused man trying to find purpose amid the weight of tradition and guilt. What no one saw was that even amid apparent certainties, Saulo carried a concern. What if all this is wrong? God's silence on that path was not absence. It was preparation for the exact moment when everything would change. And then, without warning, the light. Strong, overwhelming, absolute. It wasn't the sun. It was heaven invading earth. It was God interrupting the course of a man who followed with a blind heart. He falls to the floor. Your eyes close, but your soul opens. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That question did not come from an accuser, but from a father. And in the midst of the impact, Saul responds with the question that echoes to this day in many lost hearts. Lord, what do you want me to do? Acts 9:6. There, in the midst of the confusion, emerges the first step of a new path, a path with direction, purpose, and true light. Jesus speaks to you even when everything around you seems dark. And maybe you are exactly like that today, walking but not knowing where, doing what is expected of you, but without feeling like you truly belong to what you do. The silence you feel may be the prelude to a calling, because sometimes it is in the dark that God speaks most clearly. It is on the ground, when all our certainties crumble, that the voice of Jesus reaches us. He doesn't ask you, why did you make a mistake? But what do you want me to do with you now? His focus is not on your past, but on what he can restore in your future. Saul's blindness lasted 3 days. Enough time for him to die inside and be reborn with a new name, Paul. New man, new mission. New look, the persecutor became a preacher. The one who killed became the one who gave his life for love. This is not an exaggeration. It is what the love of Jesus is capable of doing. He doesn't wait for you to find yourself alone. He meets you in the middle of your confusion. And when you find it, it doesn't humiliate you. It doesn't expose you. He lifts you up and shows you the way. Jesus is not just a beacon in the distance. He is the safe road itself when everything around seems uncertain. If this message touched your heart and you have also been crying out for direction, write in the comments, Jesus, guide my steps, because maybe today is your Damascus day, your meeting moment. Maybe the light that unbalances you now is exactly what God will use to lift you back up firmly. When everything seems dark, close your natural eyes and allow the eyes of faith to open. Jesus is there. He still calls you by name. It still transforms paths. It still changes identities. It still gives direction to those who are wandering aimlessly. He is not far away. He's calling. And the most powerful response you can give is, Lord, what do you want me to do? But what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought about starting over. Because there is more. Much more. He had already spent it all. The money, the friends, the dreams, the hope. The youngest son in the parable was not just far from home. He was far from himself. The freedom I wanted so much turned into captivity. What seemed like autonomy turned out to be abandonment. Sitting among pigs, hungry for something he couldn't even name, he no longer thought about pride, nor what others would say. All he could remember was the smell of his father's house, of the meals that were never missed, from the look that didn't judge, from the hug that healed without saying a single word. And then something clicks in your chest. What if there's still a place for me there? I will get up and go to my father, Luke 15:18. And in that moment, the path back begins. Not in the feet, but in the heart. Jesus speaks to you even when you feel like you have lost everything. Maybe you walked away. Maybe you made choices that put you in dark places, far from the presence of God. Maybe today you are sitting among the pigs of life, habits that hurt you, people that empty you, guilt that imprison you. But there is something that no one can take away from you, the memory of the Father's love. And He has not changed. He continues to wait with open arms, looking into the distance, looking forward to the day you decide to come back. And when that happens, there will be no punishment. There will be a party. Because the heart of God is not a court, it is a house. And every true home is always ready to welcome children, even those who are lost. What few realize in this story is that the prodigal son did not have to pay for anything when he returned. The father didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He ran to meet his son. He hugged him. He put it on. He gave it back. And this is the scandal of grace. It ignores protocols and reaches even those who think they no longer deserve to be called children. This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Luke 15:24. This is the power of redemption. Jesus doesn't just forgive, He restores identity. He doesn't just let you in, He puts you back at the table. And that's exactly what He wants to do with you today. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, "Jesus, welcome me back," because maybe you need to hear this. You are still a son, even after the error, even after the fall, even with my heart in pieces. The Father has not given up on you. He never gave up. And He doesn't want you to return out of fear. He wants you to come back for love. Because you are missed in His house. Because no other place in the world will fill the void that only He can fill. And sometimes losing everything is the only way to understand that everything we need has always been in the Father. But that's not all. Something even deeper is about to be revealed. Nobody really knew her. She arrived from abroad, without status, without an impressive name, without beauty that attracted attention. She was a foreigner, widow, poor, exactly the type of person that the world ignores, that structures despise. Ruth could have hidden in anonymity, resigned herself to what others expected of someone like her. But instead, she chose to follow a faith that was not her origin, serve a God that was not part of her lineage, and love a mother-in-law who could promise her nothing but pain. Wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you settle by night, there will I settle. Your people will be my people, your God will be my God. Ruth 1:16. These words were not spoken in a palace. They were said in the midst of ruin, uncertainty, grief. And that's where the miracle begins. In the scenario where no one would bet on you, the pain of comparison may be silent, but it gnaws. Maybe today you feel like Ruth, out of place, invisible, struggling to build something with almost nothing. In a world where so many shout about their achievements, you walk in silence, doing what is right, even when no one applauds. Maybe you look around and think you are late, forgotten, out of place, but Jesus speaks to you now. God does not measure value by appearance or position. He looks at the heart, and when He sees faithfulness where everyone else sees failure, He moves. It was in the work field, in the midst of the tiring and common routine, that Ruth found favor. Boaz saw her. But more than that, God saw her first, and there is something even deeper. The same God who allowed Ruth to lose everything, her husband, her land, her stability, was the God who included her in Jesus' genealogy. A woman who was not one of the people of Israel became part of the Savior's lineage. This is no coincidence, this is purpose. It's as if heaven said, I use the forgotten to fulfill my greatest plans. If you've ever felt small, out of place, compared, rejected, this story is for you, because Ruth did not win by force. She was honored for loyalty, not through self-promotion, but through humility. And the same God who exalted you is seeing you now. If this message touched something deep in you, write in the comments, God sees me, even when the world doesn't. Because maybe you need to remember this today. You don't have to prove anything to deserve love. Heaven already chose you before any platform existed. Jesus speaks to you, even when everything around makes you believe that you are smaller, less, invisible. Don't be fooled by human applause. What God is building in your history is eternal. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. In the midst of the darkness of the night, when the silence of the temple stretched like a heavy veil over the entire nation of Israel, a voice broke through the void. But it was not addressed to great leaders, nor to experienced priests, nor to scholars of the law. It was for a boy who was not seeking prominence, but merely serving in silence. Samuel was young, inexperienced, and probably felt small in the face of it all. After all, the Bible tells us that in those days the word of the Lord was very rare. Visions were not frequent. 1 Sam 3:1. Imagine the weight, growing up in a time of divine absence, in a corrupt religious environment, with leaders who no longer heard the voice of God. But that's where the story starts to change. Samuel hears his name being called in the middle of the night. 3 times. And all 3 times he thinks it's just Eli the priest calling him. Until finally the old priest understands. If he calls you again, answer, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." And in that simple, humble, and reverent response, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears," a spiritual revolution is born. Because at that moment God begins to speak to the people again and chooses to begin with a boy. A boy who dared to say, "I am here, available, ready to listen." The pain of living without purpose is silent. She doesn't scream but sucks. It saps energy, motivation, and the sparkle in your eyes. You wake up, do what you have to do, but something inside you keeps asking, why? For what? Maybe you are feeling this way, as if his life had become just survival, as if there was no more direction, no more clarity, no more meaning. But Jesus speaks to you today. The call is still echoing. You have not lost the right to be used by God. He is still calling your name, and he does not call it by mistake. You are not a mistake. You are a choice. And there's more. God doesn't need you ready, perfect, formed. He needs you available. Samuel didn't know what to do, but he said, "Here I am." And that was enough to activate the divine plan. You don't need to understand everything now. You just need to say, "Lord, speak to me," because God is more interested in your disposition than your performance. And when you stand before him with an open heart, he reveals himself, he guides, he restores. It lights the flame of purpose that you may have let go out. If this word awakened you to something that you didn't even know existed inside, write in the comments, "Lord, I want to hear your voice." Perhaps this is exactly what God was waiting for. A willing heart, even in the midst of confusion, anxiety, anguish, because when he finds a heart that listens, he responds. And when he responds, everything changes. If this message touched your heart, click the like button so that others can also be blessed. Your like can be God's instrument to awaken someone's purpose. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now. Here you find direction for your soul and hope for your days. Jesus speaks to you and he is still calling. Nobody wanted to go near him. Nobody wanted to look, much less touch. The presence of a leper was a cruel reminder of what society rejects, of what is considered unclean, cursed, unworthy. He lived outside the city, outside of homes, outside of affection. Every step he took was preceded by a warning cry, "Unclean, unclean." An entire life summed up in an open, visible wound, which made him invisible to the eyes of others. But that day everything changed, because he had the courage to break rules, cross religious and cultural barriers, and kneel before Jesus. With a trembling voice, but with hope in his eyes, he said, "If you want, you can purify me." And at that moment, the impossible happened. Jesus, moved with intimate compassion, did what no one dared to do. He reached out his hand and touched him. "I want it, be clean," Mark 1:41. Jesus' touch was more than a healing gesture. It was an affirmation of identity. It was as if he said, "I see you, I touch you, I receive you, I love you." In a world where so many feel that no one cares, where people pass each other in a hurry, distracted, insensitive, Jesus comes and stops everything to touch exactly those who are forgotten. How many times have you felt this way? Ignored, despised, as if your pain was too small to matter, as if your inner screams were not heard by anyone. You may be smiling on the outside, but inside you bleed. You carry wounds that no one sees. Old rejections, suppressed traumas, a silent loneliness that seems to have no end. But Jesus speaks to you now. He sees what no one sees. He plays where no one plays. And here is the most powerful truth. Jesus is not afraid of your wounds. He doesn't move away from his pain, his story, his inner confusion. On the contrary, he approaches. He goes through crowds, opinions, traditions, just to connect with your heart. You don't need to hide from him. You don't need to cleanse yourself before you come to him. It is in your real state, broken, insecure, stained, that he comes to meet you and declares, "I want, be clean." His voice is not one of condemnation. It's healing. It's welcoming. It's life. If this message spoke to your heart, comment now, "Jesus touched me," because your testimony can heal another soul who, like you, thought no one cared. And no, Jesus' touch not only heals the body, it rebuilds the soul. He returns dignity, voice, freedom. You are not your pain. You are not your rejection. You are someone touched by the purest and deepest love there is, no matter how distant you felt or how many times you've thought about giving up. Jesus is near, and he is reaching out to you now. All he expects is for you to open your heart like that leper did. No masks, no defenses, just sincerity. Because it is in vulnerability that the miracle happens. Jesus speaks to you, and when he speaks, everything changes. You've come this far because something inside you is screaming for relief, for healing, for a real deep touch that goes beyond words and embraces your wounded heart. Throughout this journey, we visit stories marked by pain, rejection, uncertainty, and silence. But we also saw in each of them the unmistakable presence of a Jesus who not only observes, but intervenes, who not only listens, but responds, that not only exists, but acts. Jesus speaks to you, and he has spoken during every second of this video, through Hannah's anguish, Elijah's despair, Peter's shame, Thomas's doubt, Ruth's silent faith, and the forgotten pain of that leper on the margins of society. Each story is a reflection of the wounds many carry now, and every response from Jesus is a reminder you were never alone. But now, it's time to go beyond listening. It's time to deliver, to let go of the weight, to stop fighting alone, to surrender to the one who never gave up on you. Because no matter how thick the fog around you, there is a voice that cuts through the darkness. I am here. I see you. I call you. I want to set you free. If this message spoke to your heart, now is the time to pray with me. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you can, and allow yourself to feel. Don't fight this moment. Jesus wants to speak to you, again, directly, intimately, and powerfully. Shall we go together? Lord Jesus, here is my soul as it is, tired, burdened, wounded, but willing to listen to you. I ask you to touch me like you touched that leper. May you look at me as you looked at Zacchaeus. May you hug me like the Father hugged the prodigal son. I don't just want to move on. I want to be restored. I want to live again. Free me from fear, silent anguish, comparison that paralyzes me, and the feeling that no one cares. I recognize you are the only one who knows me inside and yet loves me completely. Therefore, I surrender. Talk to me, Jesus. Speaks every day. Show me the purpose, the path, and the strength to continue. I receive you as my Savior, my friend, my Father. And I declare my soul belongs to you. Amen. If you've come this far, it's because God is working in your life. This is no coincidence. It's called, it's an answer. It's healing, and what comes now is as urgent as everything that has already been said. If this message spoke to you, what you will discover in the video that is on screen now could change your life even more. Don't leave without watching, because what comes next could be what's needed for your release. Jesus still has more to reveal to your heart, and this next word is a powerful complement to what he started here. Write in the comments, "I made it to the end." Your testimony may touch someone who is still deciding whether to continue or not. It could be the impetus needed for another afflicted soul to say yes to Jesus. Share this message with someone who is silent but screaming inside. Be a channel of relief, faith, and hope. And if you haven't signed up yet, do so now. Not out of habit, but out of purpose. Each new video is an extension of this divine care. Your subscription helps this message reach other lives like yours. This is mission, it's communion, it's transformation, and to close with the most powerful thing. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. You knew the truth. Now live in it, share, spread it out, and come back here, because Jesus talks to you, and he's not finished talking yet.